Thanks for tuning in to the CrossNet Volleyball Podcast with your host, Ryan Millar. That's me. We're brought to you exclusively by the good folks at CrossNet, the world's first four-way volleyball game used by thousands of professional volleyball players around the globe. Whether you're using your net to train or using it to connect with family and friends, CrossNet brings out the competitor in all of us. Now, friends of the show, who I am officially deeming as CrossNetters, can use code GOLD at checkout to receive $20 off your next purchase. That's code GOLD, G-O-L-D, at checkout to receive $20 off your next purchase. Your support of CrossNet supports our show, and we greatly appreciate it. All right, welcome to the loft, everyone. This is my office. This is where all the magic happens and where we're going to be conducting all the shows that we're going to be producing. Super excited about getting started with this podcast and producing some really good volleyball content for all of us to enjoy. We're going to be connecting with the best of the best in the world of volleyball and getting their perspectives on all things volley, which we're all in love with, of course. Such a huge part of my life, the many great things that volleyball has given me, and I'm taking this opportunity to produce volleyball content to give back to the community, grow the community, and really just get to know the personalities in the game in a more structured but informal format, where we can open up around taking you, the volleyball enthusiasts, into the locker room, into the day in the life of being a professional volleyball player, being a high quality coach, being an entrepreneur in the sport. We're really going to have so many incredible guests, and my goal over the next little bit of time is just to be producing content and getting it out to you guys. I've got some wonderful guests lined up on the show, having them on the Audible podcast, which, if you guys follow podcasts in any of the apps that you use to get your podcasts on, whether that be Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Podcasts or whatever it ends up being, we're going to be everywhere. Just look for the CrossNet podcast. And then, of course, here at the YouTube channel, the CrossNet YouTube channel, we want to blow this channel up. Make sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications, because we're going to constantly be pumping in content along the way. Show number 1, super excited, very informal. Again, it's just me up in my office making it happen with the wonderful support of the good folks at CrossNet. If you haven't checked out CrossNet already, please do go to crossnetgame.com. The game is super fun. For all of you volleyball enthusiasts, whether indoor, beach, doesn't matter, they've got you covered. It's a pretty cool game to play and to get used to. Mixes up volleyball a little bit, and I have had a ton of fun playing it with my buddies. So on this show here today, we're going to show you part 1 of 2 with arguably the greatest, most popular, most well-known, and best volleyball player of all time, Karch Kiray. I wanted to have Karch be our first guest because he's such an icon in the sport. His ability to transcend both the success that he had indoor, and then, of course, the success that he had on the beach, winning 2 gold medals indoor, winning a gold medal on the beach. Still the only person in the history of volleyball to win gold medals in both events. And so Karch is a pioneer, and to get his thoughts on the game of volleyball today, get his thoughts on the preparation that he's putting in with the women's national team as the head coach right now as they prepare for Tokyo next year, with the games being postponed due to coronavirus and COVID and all the craziness that's going on in the world. Why not pull us all together and talk about the thing that we love most, which is the sport of volleyball? So go ahead, listen. I'm going to post the interview with Karch here. This is, again, part 1. A little later, I'm going to post part 2. And stick with us, because there's a lot of good stuff coming around the bend. Some amazing guests. I'm telling you, all the top names in the sport will be on the show consistently. And this is special for me because I get to tap back into a sport that I played at a professional level for almost 15 years. I love both indoor and the beach. I'm going to be wanting to participate in all the events and get insider info and make sure that everybody is willing to share a perspective that gives you all the type of insider information that you need and should expect to help continue to thrive and develop your love for the sport. And so have fun with this interview with Karch, and we'll see you on the next show. I appreciate you taking the time. We're putting this podcast together. I'm excited about it. Anything to do to continue to grow the game, I'm all for. Anything that I can do to give back to volleyball what it's given me, I'm more than willing to jump on board to do. And you were one of the first people that kind of popped in my mind to be on the show. So I appreciate it very much. I just want to be casual in our conversation. I've got a couple questions and wanted to pick your brain on a few things. And
Great.
So that's kind of the flow of what we're going to be doing here. Give me a sense, give everybody a sense of how did you first get into volleyball?
My father grew up in Hungary, and he played, everybody who grows up, basically everybody in the world but the United States plays soccer growing up. So he played a lot of soccer. And he played a lot of volleyball and ended up, as he got a little older, played on the Hungarian junior national volleyball team. And so when he came to our country, he lived through a failed revolution in Hungary in 1956, where they were on the verge of getting their country back and ousting the puppet government that was controlled by the Soviet Union. We now call them Russia. But that revolution failed, and if he did not escape, it was almost certain that he would be tortured and executed. So he came to this country and met my mom at the University of Michigan and began teaching me how to play volleyball when I was 6 years old. Mostly, I don't know if it was so much teaching. It was just that we were living in Santa Barbara at the time, and he was working really hard, 80, 90, 100 hours a week, as interns often do. That's what you do first year out of medical school. But on weekends, we got some time together. That was dad and son time. And so he'd play some beach volleyball on East Beach in Santa Barbara, California, which is, again, a wonderful place to play. And then between games, when he had the energy, he and I would bop the ball back and forth. So that's how we started. I think we even have some home movies, as we would, at first we'd just try to keep it, could we keep it going 6 times? And then it was 10, and then it was 50. And so a lot of fun to get that start. It wasn't all I did on weekends. I had a lot of friends there, and we were doing all kinds of fun stuff at the beach. There's tons of fun things to do, but one of them was to pepper a little with him. Yeah. And then eventually 3 years later, he felt I had learned enough that we got on a court. He actually put me with a better player. And so I remember playing my first true over the net, like on a real court game of volleyball, doubles with a good player against my dad across the net. And then eventually, a couple years later, I read a Sports Illustrated article, a very rare article about a volleyball player, and it happened to be about one of the U.S.'s all-time greats. His name is Larry Rundle, and he was not only a great indoor player and played in the 1968 Olympics, at which they stunned the volleyball world and upset the number 1 seed and number 1 ranked team in the world, the Soviet Union, on the very first match of round robin competition. But he was also a great beach player. And so we read that he had set some kind of record as being the youngest ever to play in a CBVA tournament, because at that time there were no such thing as age group tournaments. It was just play novice, play B, A, whatever it is. You could always enter up, you couldn't enter down. So we entered So since he had set the record, according to Sports Illustrated, as an 11-year-old, and I read it as an 11-year-old, we decided, well, that'd be kind of fun. I'll do that too. So we played in our first tournament, my dad and I, in Corona del Mar, not too far from where I am here in San Clemente, but Corona del Mar, California. And we ended up being partners, my dad and I, for the first 4 years of competitive volleyball. So huge thanks to him for getting me literally my start, my first coach, my first teammate. And of course, my mom was along the way too, just providing us a lot of moral support too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It reminds me a little bit of my start as well, because I started my older brother, John. I was much more into basketball at the time, but my older brother, John, started playing, and he's like, hey, I need someone to play with, so you're going to start playing so I can beat up on you. And by that time, I was actually a lot shorter than he was, but that quickly changed, as you can probably imagine. Did you play other sports too when you were growing up?
Yes, I played a ton of soccer, thanks to my dad teaching that also. He even coached some of the teams I played on, both AYSO and club teams. So played a lot of soccer growing up until I got to Santa Barbara High School in 10th grade, and then decided to focus on volleyball. Played some Little League baseball, did some swimming, both racing and just some of the things, like a lot of people who grew up near a YMCA might recognize they had swimming programs where you reach different levels. Like, I don't know, first one might have been tadpole and you wanted to work your way up to dolphin, past the swimming proficiency test. So I did that too. Did a little tennis, and goofed around with some other things, but in an organized way, a lot of soccer, and then of course a lot of volleyball.
Man, your and I path is interesting, because 10th grade was when I decided that I was going to focus entirely on volleyball, because what was interesting was when I got into high school, my freshman year, I was again much more into basketball. And so I tried out for the team and I got cut. It's not a Michael Jordan story by any means, but I got cut from basketball, but I made the volleyball team. And so I thought, and I enjoyed the sport. I was starting to grow a little bit. My freshman year, I was 5'10". So, I wasn't short, but I'm not like overly tall at that point. Then my sophomore year, 10th grade, I'm 6'4" all of a sudden.
Oh, 6 inches.
So the basketball coach comes back to me that year. I can still remember the conversation. He goes, hey, you're going to try out again, right? And by that point, I was already hooked. I was all into volleyball, and I just said, no, I'm going to focus on volleyball. And then my junior year, I was 6'7". So 9 inches in those 2 years. And the basketball coach came back to me again. Said, you guys try out again. And I'm like, no. By that time, I was already getting recruited. And I mean, there was no reason to play basketball anymore. I was all into volleyball. So
got to admire his effort. He did not give up. And that's what any coach should do. I think I saw the handwriting on the wall too. Like, I played a lot of soccer and I was pretty good at it. But tall and skinny is not as good as a little shorter, a little stockier. That lower center of gravity can be big in a sport like soccer. You can excel at 5'6", 5'8". You can be a world-class player. And I would get tripped or whatever. That's just part of the sport. No complaint. But I'd just be flying around like a rag doll. So the only time the height helped me was as center fullback, because you can get up in the air more, defend better, head the ball out of trouble, things like that. But in general, you and I both, we fell in love with this sport. And here I am 50 plus years later, still in love with the sport, but a very different side of the sport now that I've gotten into coaching the last 10, 11, 12 years.
Yeah. We'll get into that a little bit. Who are some of the players that were inspiring to you when you were younger coming up in the game? I mean, you mentioned a few, but was there anybody that you kind of followed and was like, yeah,
that's a good question. And I grew up in such a different age. I'll call it the Stone Age, because there was no internet, no email, no fax, no social media, no club volleyball, no nothing. So no YouTube. Now, if you're growing up, somebody young can say, I want to watch Ryan Millar when he was playing for USA, or I want to watch, and it doesn't even have to be an American. It could be a Brazilian or an Italian or a Russian, or some of the great players from all over the world. Well, at that time, there was nothing but pictures. And so my friends and I, especially when we were in Santa Barbara High School, we couldn't wait till the next issue of Volleyball Magazine or Volleyball Monthly, especially Volleyball Monthly, would come. And they had amazing photography. They had enough of a budget that they would send a really good photographer to something like the World Championships. And then they'd have a whole issue devoted to that. And so we never got to see moving pictures of what these guys would do. All we got to see were like 3 Russian blockers with their arms over the net, parallel with the floor, completely horizontal. And so we would pretend to be these guys. What would be one? Alexander Savin, one of the all-time great middle blockers for the Soviet Union. Bernard Roshman, one of the great outside hitters for Brazil. So we would look at these pictures and just drool and ogle and then pretend to be them when we would have open gym time or when we were practicing with our high school team. And we would have a competition, you know, kind of make the American team or the Russian team or the Cuban team. Some of the Diego Lopera, this guy had like a 50-inch jump, and he was like 5'10", but just utterly dominant in the world of international volleyball. So we knew their names, we knew their pictures, but we didn't know what they really did in movement, and we would just pretend to try to replicate that when we were doing our own thing.
Yeah. Oh, I can totally relate to that for sure. You know, you've probably heard this lots of times, but many people would call you the greatest of all time, the GOAT, right? So you're still the only person to ever win gold indoor on the beach. Do you think that ever changes? You think somebody makes a transition just with the way the game is now, whether male or female, doesn't matter. Do you think anybody does it?
I do think somebody will do it. There's no way somebody won't. It's not going to be easy for sure. All right, who's somebody who has aspirations to do that? The outside hitter for Katherine Plummer, for Stanford, Katherine Plummer, who had such an amazingly successful career, 3 NCAA championships in 4 years, but she's also played at a world-class level on the sand already.
Wow.
I think what you're going to have to do, someone will have to do, is focus on one for a while and then make the transition to the other. And so growing up, I played back and forth. I played both. So even at UCLA, playing the long season ending in early May. In the summers, I was playing a lot of sand, then back to school and a lot of indoor. So mixing and matching that whole time. Then focused more on indoors as I joined the USA team, because that needed my focus. The team needed my focus for me to be the best at helping my team accomplish what it wanted to. And then got back to my original roots once I retired from the USA team and could devote more attention to beach. So I think that's what it's going to take. I know somebody can do it. The thing I want to see happen, I don't know if it ever will, but the schedule would have to fit. But the real challenge would be, could somebody win both in the same Olympics, like swimmers?
Wow.
So if they could set up the schedule in such a way, and if an indoor team, if somebody was so good indoors that they would be okay, and I don't know that they would be, as a coach, I'd be pretty hesitant. But, you know, if we could have, I don't know, let's say it were a different time and it were a Misty May and she was the best setter in the country. Of course we'd think about having her play on Sunday and Tuesday and Thursday and on the beach on Monday and Wednesday. Absolutely. So could somebody do that? That's going to be the ultimate test. I'd love to see somebody do it and smash all the records. I don't even know if the schedule is set up for that, but I know volleyball, it would be such a huge story that it would be in international volleyball's, FIVB's interest to set the schedule up in such a way that maybe the beach competition for that particular sex, gender, would be the opposite of the indoor days. That's the way that it could possibly happen. Because everybody plays alternating days.
That's right. During the Olympics, you play one day, and then you rest one day and rest. And you could realistically see them do that. I've never thought about somebody doing both and trying to go for both in the same. I don't. They would have to be some ungodly athlete. I don't know, just a total phenom, because I just know what it takes to even get to the level indoors. I'm assuming it takes just as much or even more to get to the same level outdoor on the beach. And so to put those together would be incredible.
Yep. But, you could see somebody like the outside hitter Leon, who's now playing for Poland, or Taylor Sander, Reed Pretty. Look what Reed's doing indoors, outdoors now. What an amazing story. And winning the Manhattan Beach Open last year.
That was
so
awesome.
Pumped for him. With his brand new partner, he only played that one tournament together, and they win. So Reed is clearly capable of that. A Taylor Sander, people like that are capable of that. In the same Olympics, it'd be really tough. The one thing that would be working in their favor is when you only play one match per day, there's a little less draining if you're mixing that beach match in. But if it's in a place like Tokyo, and it's expected to be the hottest, most humid Olympics ever, that is a different story. It would have to be a huge amount based on recovery and being really smart with managing your nutrition, your hydration, your core temperature, and all of those things. But I get excited because not for me to do that, but for somebody to do that, that would be a feat that would be just push the limits so far beyond. And the other thing that I think makes it a little more possible in this day and age is that the beach volleyball rules changed somewhat right after 2000. They went to rally scoring, and more importantly, the court shrunk. And as you've seen now, with a smaller court, the taller player, the more ex-indoor player or even current indoor player has a bigger role to play. A taller blocker like a Phil Dahlhauser now has less court to block. And his defender then has less court to cover behind him. So you're seeing that it's becoming more of a big man's game than it used to be, where Mike Whitmarsh used to be the big man at 6'6". Now it's guys who are 6'10", 6'11" sometimes. So that too is more suited to the ex-indoor player or even maybe the current indoor player. And so that's where I don't think it's impossible, even though I think it'd be incredibly difficult, but it sure would be fun to see somebody attempt that, either on the men's side or on the women's side. Carrie Walsh played indoors in Sydney. The team just missed a bronze medal, and she had a bad experience there with becoming ineligible or not being able to actually participate for part of that tournament. Goes on and wins the next gold medal on the beach. Carrie could have easily done something like that too.
Wow, it's crazy to even think about. But you're right. Who knows? Someday somebody might be able to do it. And your point about the change in the game on the beach is very valid, because you're right. I mean, you can play a match at the Olympics and the match would be over in 45 minutes.
Exactly.
Just because you rally scored to 21, best 2 out of 3. So I mean, it's like
if you win in 2. You're done. You're off the beach in 40 minutes. Now, again, Tokyo, record heat and humidity. I get that. But let's talk about France, LA. Those would be much more doable because there's much less humidity and less heat in a July or August time period. As warm as LA or France or Paris can get, it's not Tokyo. So I wouldn't, physiologically, I don't think it's out of the realm at all.
Let me bring you back a little bit. So I played 7 years in Italy, and I know you played in Italy as well. I actually played with Fabio Vula. I played with Stefano Margutti, which I know
play with those guys. Fabio was so fun to play with. He was great.
You got any? When you think back on that time, does anything stick out to you in those years that you played? And I actually played a year in Fort Lee, which was really close to Ravenna. I don't know if you know Fort Lee, but so we would go to Ravenna all the time just because it was a cool city. It's it's right on the sea. It's nice. You have any stories anything sticks out during your time playing in Italy? I know I've got a bunch. 7 years. It was I learned how to speak Italian. The league was fantastic. Just everything about playing there really helped my game. Anything that sticks out to you during your time there?
A lot of those similar things. for me too. Learning Italian, I'm really glad that I got the chance to be a learner. Growing up in California, almost all of us take a good amount of Spanish in junior high, in high school, but it's just not the same thing when you get to practice it every day with people who are native speakers. And so that is really cool to be able to do. So I enjoyed that aspect a lot. And as you mentioned, when I got to play, it was like a world all-star league. This was many of the best players in the world, all in the same league, with a lot of very good Italian players too. But when people would converge on that, it was very high level volleyball. The difference was that for most of my time with USA, we were in a very different system. And the bottom line was we were not allowed to play in any foreign professional league and be a member of our national team. You had to choose one or the other, but not both. So the reasoning for that was I completely understand when the training center that had been in Dayton, Ohio for 4 years, moved out in the early 1980s to San Diego, California. The team became a year-round pursuit.
Right.
And that was smart because up until then, both our men for the most part and our women for the most part, when we were getting ready for an Olympics, a world championships, the standard way of operating was, okay, let's get an all-star team together. We'll train 2 weeks, go play the Olympics. And we get beaten like a drum. No wonder. It's because the Russians are together 10 months a year, or the Cubans or the Polish. And so we had no hope of doing anything significant without making it also a year-round endeavor. So we had a lot of good young guys who were really raw join the team. So we had potential, but we needed a ton of work. So the rule was, you are with this team 11 and a half months out of the year. And so we would train together in San Diego, and then occasionally we would go find a team like Cuba or somebody and go to Cuba, let's say in February, and do a friendly series, and then have Cuba come back, and Brazil, and almost all of our competition was exhibition tours. So as a result, none of us really played in Italy. We weren't allowed to. And in fact, as we started having success, the offers kept growing, and it got to the point where some of our guys just couldn't say no to the money anymore. Great players like Pat Powers and Dusty Dvorak. And so partway through, between the 84 Olympics and the 88 Olympics, they finally couldn't afford not to accept those offers anymore. And so they went to play in Italy. But it meant that even though they were at the top of their game and might have started at the next Olympics, they could no longer be a part of our program and a part of our Olympic team. We were lucky that we had great players step in, fill in for them. People like Jeff Stork, who stepped in for Dusty. So we had people behind, or Doug Partee coming in so Steve Timmons could move over to the opposite to fill in for Pat. But really had very little experience overseas. Then when I retired from the team, it was right around that time, retired from the USA team, it was right around that time that they actually changed the rule. And so you could now play. We'd worked our way up from 19th in the world to being the best team in the world. And then it made sense that we have now put in the work and laid the foundation so that the program no longer needs to play catch up. And playing in a league like a World All-Star League like Italy, if anything, is really good for a young player, maybe somebody trying to break into the USA starting lineup. She or he needs 50, 60 high-level competitive matches. That's really actually good for them, as long as they're not playing the brutal schedule that they're playing now, where it's almost 12 months a year. So that changed a lot, but I loved playing with Fabio, with Andrea Gardini, with Stefano Margutti, with Roberto Masciarelli, and lots of other guys. It was a great league. The passion that they had there, loved playing in front of these away crowds that just hated us, and they would boo and whistle at everything we did. But the fact that they had full gyms everywhere we went, and people knew a lot about volleyball, were really passionate. We'd lose a match, and all the, you'd go out to the market the next day, or go out and grab a cappuccino, and everybody's like, "What happened?" Lots of people cared. When they loved it when you won, and they'd ask immediately. They'd be in what they'd always say in Italy, in crisi, in crisis. Lose a match. It was. A lot of times it was, they say, dalle stelle alle stalle, from the stars to the stalls, like the horse stalls. You can go down from the top to the bottom, or the bottom to the top, very quickly. They ride the passion. I didn't want to ride it that much, but I sure loved how much people care, and still do care, about volleyball in that country. That was amazing to be able to go to city after city and see how hard people pulled for their own team, and how much they followed volleyball.
Yeah, it makes me, because I can just relate to a lot of what you're talking about. It's really the closest that Americans can get to how crazy people are really about soccer in Europe. I mean, you play in these cities, and people have so much city pride, or so much regional pride, and they're just ride or die for that team. And whether it's soccer, whether it's volleyball, whether it's basketball, whatever it is, when you get those locals, and they're always at the games, and they're inviting you over to their house for dinner. But you're right, though, because when you're losing, it's, what happened? Like, why did you play so bad? And it's like, well, I mean, I didn't mean to play bad. We tried. But anyway, I can totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and they care generally a lot more about their local team than about the national team, except maybe at the Olympics or at a World Championships, or a World Cup of soccer. Then they get super pumped. But for the most part, they care a lot more about regional and local alliances, and feel really close ties, and just feel like they're a part of the team. And that was something really special, that they lived and died this stuff, just breathed it every day, followed it every day. And we're not so used to that in volleyball here in this country. We don't have a professional league yet, or lots have been tried. None have found success, even though some announcements came out this week. And I'm on the advisory board of the Athletes Unlimited group that's going to be starting a professional league for women early next year. And so we wish them great luck, and we do want to see a professional league happen in this country for both women and for men. But it's been not an easy puzzle to solve, and so we wish people luck in solving that. But you can see it over there. So passionate. And we had a lot of success, and that was really fun too. And I got to play with my great friend, and probably my favorite indoor teammate of all time, because we got to play together in so many different arenas once we graduated from college, where we were arch rivals at UCLA and USC. But that's Steve Timmons, and he was so he and I played together on that Italian team for those 2 years, and had a wonderful experience. Won an Italian championship, an Italian Cup, a World Club Championship, and a Champions League championship. So got one of each in those 4 years, and it was a really special experience. And I also treasure it because of having had the opportunity to learn a new language and meet a lot of great people over there, that some of whom I've been able to stay in contact with.
Were you guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but were you coached by Daniele Ricci?
We sure were. Absolutely.
He was my coach too when I played a year in Milan, and he was our coach there. So I thought that was the connection, but I wasn't 100% sure.
He was a great guy.
Yeah.
Really liked playing for him. I also thought he was wise in that he was a young coach, and he didn't have so much. He was humble enough to say, look, we've got some great players like Fabio, like Andrea, like Steve, like Karch. why wouldn't I want to ask them their opinion and ask them their feedback on, you know, like how we're running our systems, how we train. And so more than the average coach, he gave us the chance to have a good amount of influence on what we did and how it, especially in training. And so Steve and I gave a lot of suggestions. He was open to a lot of those, and we implemented a lot. We brought a lot of USA type training with us. And so I think that had an impact. And so really appreciated his openness and flexibility, because he understood that there's a lot of knowledge and experience and success amongst that group of players that we had. And to collaborate worked better than to sit from on high and just work in a more hierarchical fashion and not solicit feedback.
Yeah, I remember. I'm just thinking back on the time that I had with him, and he was very much a player's coach. Like, he was very open to ideas. He's very open to different ways of doing things, different strategies. Because on our team in Milan, we also had a lot of really experienced players that, to your point, I think he would have been foolish as a coach. Look, he'd been around. He'd obviously been coaching a long time. He'd been successful, but he was very open to different ways and philosophies of doing things. So you're bringing me back to some memories. That was a long time ago, but it was a lot of fun.